We're live.
This is Literary Roadhouse, one short story once a week. I'm Rami.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Anais.
And this week we're reading a story called Wyatt, Thurst by Brendan Bowles. And this story was actually the winner of the RBC Brownwin Wallace Award for Emerging Writers in 2016, and that was presented by the Writers' Trust of Canada. So just a very brief summary, just to get listeners oriented. This story details the experiences of a professional bull rider and his relationship with a fellow bull rider named Wyatt Thurst.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to start with Rami because of the expression you just made. So, Rami, what did you think of the story?
I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I have more comments in detail about everything, but yeah, for the most part, it was a good story. Kind of predictable, but I don't know if that's also me having experienced, being a more experienced short story reader now, I guess.
I thought you were going to say being experienced as a bull rider.
That's what I thought. I was very excited for that confession. So, Gerald, what do you think?
I really enjoyed it. It's something very different. It's not something I've had experience of, but I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters. I pretty much liked everything about it.
Okay. Yeah, I really liked it too. I liked it a lot more on my second read through than the first, so that's good. That's a sign of a good story, I guess. And it's a shame Maya's not here because she and I had already started discussing this in Slack, which is also a good sign of the stories when we're all like jumping, we're like already discussing it before we're on air. So, Rami, you said you had other comments and questions about the story. Please run free like a bull. I don't know.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Great. So, all right, I'll start by saying what this story reminded me of. It reminded me of something that may be written by Jack Kerouac, like an on-the-road type of thing, which I know last week we we talked about our high school English teacher, but it's just, another story that I had read during high school and learned about this whole beat generation that existed and how people were kind of like nihilistic or existential or whatever, and just having this kind of come what may attitude and living life one day at a time, kind of carefree, and so it kind of very much reminded me of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see because it is a slice of life. It is it's a window into somebody's unusual lifestyle, and like Kerouac, there's journeys involved. There's lots of traveling around, and this incredibly dangerous thing that they do for the enjoyment of others. It's very strange, but it's what people do, I suppose.
It's funny because so we're talking already about the prose a little bit, and I think the reason why it feels that way is because the prose, it's very polished. You can tell he went through with every sentence, getting the right word through. Like, you can feel the labor that went into the prose, and it has this very sort of like punchy rhythm. There's something kind of aggressive about it, masculine, you could even say, or at least the way that I was reading it just felt very like, this is a man, it to me. And the first time I read it, in some places it was a bit jarring. Like, I was just like, oh, this is overworked. But on the second run through, it felt a lot smoother. I guess it's one of those, like, it's kind of like when you first read a novel and you're not used to the prose of the author right away. So like the first chapter is always the slowest, as you're like trying to figure out how this voice moves. So once I had done that, I enjoyed the story a lot better. But the first time, there was a few sentences where I felt like, okay, all right, you're doing the thing, right? But then that sort of went away, and I was able to just sort of enjoy the rhythm, because it has a very nice rhythm to it, has a very good pace to it. So I liked the prose, and it was very, just like worked to the finest detail.
Yeah, I think rhythm is something that many new writers don't understand and don't practice and don't learn about, because when you read a writer that knows about rhythm, that knows what makes an interesting and engaging story or an engaging sentence or even a paragraph, then you'll see they have that rhythm, that easy rhythm. The sentence length is just right. Like you say, Anis, I'm sure he's worked this a lot to get it to be as good as it is. But that's, it certainly worked for me.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny, we keep sort of talking about age and years and stuff. So the Kerouac and the Beat Generation, that's many decades ago. And this author is young. This story came out in 2016, I believe, and it was nominated and won a bunch of awards. And he's a rising Toronto star. So it is sort of, I guess, refreshing to see that, like, that level of, especially because it didn't feel like we always talk about the MFA voice that a lot of the young authors do now. And it wasn't MFA voice, it was different.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was refreshing.
Was it strange to you to read about cowboys in Canada as opposed to the United States?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll admit that, yeah, I did a double take. I was like, Miss Alberta, what? Then it was fine. Then it made sense because it is a very, rugged, they have a lot of, like, land. And it made sense. Like, it wasn't that hard to adjust. But, yeah, being American and very American-centric in my thinking, because that's the way we're raised. As soon as I see cowboys, I'm like, America. So it was kind of fun to have that thinking challenged and burst a little bit.
They do it in Australia and New Zealand too. There you go.
Yeah, there's other places where there's cowboys. Wow. Not just us. Wow. Yeah. So that was fun. Actually, I like that whole Miss Alberta thing in a military outfit, carrying the Canadian flag with fireworks coming out of the pole. It's like, that's great. Also, the extraness is not just American. Yes. Over the top.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we already sort of talked about the prose, but let's talk a bit about the characters, because it's named after one of the characters. The characters are very important. So let's start with Wyatt Thurst. What did you guys think about him? You know where I'm going with this, but I'm gonna start. I'm like holding myself back. So
well done.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was a strange character, wasn't he, Wyatt Thurst? And I suppose it's one of these things where you have to be a particular kind of character, so something out of the norm, to do this job and to travel around and do this very, very life-threatening job. But yeah, there was a bit of an undertone, wasn't there, I think, with Wyatt? Was there? I don't know, maybe.
I think there definitely was the homoeroticism throughout the story. I think that's why I enjoyed the second read-through too, because the first read-through, there was the in-your-face homoeroticism that you couldn't escape. And on the second read-through, I'm like, this second paragraph describing the 8 seconds on top of a bull riding is extremely sexual. Like, the first time I just took it at face value. And then you get to all the homoerotic stuff. Then when you reread it, you're like, wait a minute. Everywhere now.
But that wasn't Wyatt describing it. That was the narrator, right?
No, I know. It was the narrator, but yeah. So let's talk about that. So sticking to Wyatt, Rami, are you unconvinced that there is an unspoken secret about Wyatt?
I don't think it mattered to me either way. It's not something I really thought about too much. I think it was more, well, because we don't really hear. Obviously, we don't hear Wyatt's inner thoughts because we can only hear the narrator. So how the narrator described some interactions, you could sense that maybe there was something, stronger feelings than just platonic admiration for someone. And it kind of, I mean, aside from that, the relationship kind of reminded me of another book I read in high school. It's called A Separate Peace by John Knowles. And it talked about the relationship between Jean and Finney. And Finney was, the stud, the star athlete. And that kind of is how I felt about Wyatt, how he was depicted as, a really sturdy, rugged guy and risk taker, daredevil, someone who, you know, most kids would think, oh, this is a cool guy. Well, most kids and adults, I guess, too. And the ladies obviously adore it as well.
Yeah, but there was that line about Wyatt that I think was pretty telling, which is when he's talking about when they stand on the freeway between cars, they have to hold the position or not get hit by a car. And he said that in Wyatt's case, he's the only one who didn't close his eyes. He's the only one who stayed out longer than was necessary. And it's pretty quick. It stopped looking like courage. And then it made you wonder about the psychic shape of the thing and what's going on with him. So I think there's a sense in which it's not really that he's such a daredevil. I think he has a pretty legitimate death wish, and I wonder if that's tied to all the clues about him being closeted. Because I mean, there's some other ones, like they don't explain why his stepdad kicked everything out of the house. What was that all about? There's some animosity with his parents. There's that moment that happens in the bathroom where you think Wyatt is trying to, like, you know, he's feeling out whether or not he should push for something with the narrator. The narrator has that line where Wyatt Thurst says his name. He already knew the name, and he goes, until then, he'd only talk around me, but also kind of for me, I could tell. And, you know, like when people are like flirting with each other, but they haven't quite been introduced, I know what that sense is of, like, they're not talking to me, but they're talking for my benefit. So there was like that going on. So it did make me wonder, like, you know, Wyatt, is the death wish tied to his, to being closeted in some way?
Yeah, there's a line I was just looking at now where I was talking about Ty. Yeah, no, there's I think you can miss that undertone on the first read through. I certainly did, actually, but on the second read through, you then begin to realize that there is this sort of deeply sexual undertone into most of their discussions, and most of the times they come together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, on the first read through, it was pretty clear to me that I'm like pretty sure the narrator is gay, like pretty sure. But Wyatt, I thought might not be. I thought that the narrator was projecting his desires into somebody who wasn't. And it was on the second read through where I was like, no, maybe Wyatt too is closeted in some way. Might be bisexual because he sleeps with women, you know, I don't know. But the second one gave me more insight into Wyatt, and then made his death a little bit more tragic, because we should talk about that line at the end, which was, we were all strong, none strong enough. Strong enough for what? And then I wonder if it has something to do with living with the secret, or just, you know, Wyatt not being able to overcome that demon specifically.
Yeah, I think it could be that. It could be that the author is equating the two. Yeah, I've got to think about that for a second.
What was it for you, Rami? We were all strong, none strong enough for what? Like, what did that final line mean for you?
I didn't make the connection you did. I do think he kind of, Wyatt, I agree, may have had a death wish, and it was more than just simply risk taking for the fun of it, but just out of, and again, it ties back to this whole like nihilistic feeling, and you know, why you know, life is meaningless and all that stuff. So and maybe I thought it could have been stemmed from a rough upbringing in childhood, family issues, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but it's just funny because, like, so yeah, it could be any reason. So he was raised in a wealthy family. Wyatt was, not the narrator. The narrator lived with his sick mom, who I think had cancer, in a trailer. But Wyatt, the parents would talk poolside on a phone brought on a silver tray, right? So you get the sense that Wyatt's parents have money, and the author doesn't clue you into anything about Wyatt's life that would suggest it was a super rough upbringing. If anything, the mom is like trying to bridge a gap between stepdad and son, like, yep, he's here, and relaying the messages. So I feel like if the author is focusing on all these little homoerotic hints, it has to be something about that, because it can't just out of the blue be like because his dad beat him as a kid when there's like no clues about that, right? It's like I'm paying attention to the signposts that I'm getting from the author, so that's why it seems to me like the death wish has to be tied to that, or else why didn't you give me any other clues?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the outward. Interesting that when the narrator gets injured and there's the bit where lost it there. The bit where Wyatt has his hand on the bottom of his stomach, sort of somewhere around about there, and he said he's going to kiss me, and I might have to sort of kick him on his ass or something like that. And so it makes you wonder whether the narrator is gay, or whether he's just, he's in the thrall of Wyatt, and Wyatt's this big sort of superhero to him.
No, I think the narrator's definitely gay despite that line. I'm glad you brought that line up because I knew that was going to be the line. It's like, but maybe he's not. But I think when some gay men are closeted, then it sort of comes out as a sort of homophobia. Like they become, you know what I'm saying? Like there's that old sort of stereotype about that the people who are most vocally against the gays, maybe there's something there, maybe not. But like, like in order to not seem gay because you're trying to hide your secret, you come down harder on anything that would push you towards that thing that you're fighting. But there's so many other clues that he is. Like when he describes his forearms, and he's like, the kind of forearms that inspire unwelcome combinations of words in a man's head. Words like erotic asphyxiation and beating death, which is a little bit both things. The arm is making think of erotic asphyxiation, and then the beating death. I wasn't 100% sure what it was, but I thought is that the threat of being beaten to death if the secret got out. That's what I thought about. And other things, like when he talks about Russian gymnasts, he's like, rip the leotards from their fist-tight crotches. Like that's where the focus is in this Russian gymnast metaphor, like just little things. I was like, Or when Wyatt's on the hood of the car dying, he's like, but for the spectators, I would have given him like the drink of whiskey or the alcohol from my mouth. Like, yeah. Okay, I'm pretty sure the narrator's gay and just also closeted and fighting that.
Yeah, maybe they're both fighting that, because there's a line where he says, "Did your mum know?" I can't be sure she didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who
I think they were talking. The narrator was asking Wyatt if Wyatt's mom knew about his dad packing up all of his belongings. I think because it was right after he was describing all of that, and I thought that was pretty interesting. How Wyatt just decided to just leave all of his belongings from childhood just on the side of the road and drive off and watch it disappear in the distance.
Yeah, he's pretty angry, and the thing is, again, all the signposts seem to suggest it's that. Which then, when I started doing like the story behind the story, that I sometimes was like, what happened in that camper? Because, hey, listen, narrator used to ride with the Christian siblings, the Christian boys, Ty and Justin. But now, once he makes friends with Wyatt, they're running around in a camper. Hello. Maybe not, though. Like, maybe they were both closeted enough, but hey.
I think the narrator is projecting, and you, Anais, might be projecting a little bit.
Why? So why is the narrator projecting?
Why? Because we don't have like concrete evidence that Wyatt's may be gay.
I mean, I hear you. I hear you in the sense that I don't think you're wrong. I think to read this and say Wyatt definitely has a death wish. We don't know why, and that the narrator is projecting because of his own repressed homosexuality, because he's closeted. He is projecting the reason behind Wyatt's death wish to be something similar to why he might be doing this is a totally valid reading, and that Wyatt actually isn't in any way. Absolutely. The only reason why I push back, and I'm like, yeah, but that bathroom scene, why was his hand lingering? It could have been a coincidence, though. It could have just been had helped him up, and that lingering moment was also in the narrator's head. So there's a degree to which a lot of this could be in the narrator's head, and Wyatt isn't gay, or he could be. I don't know. You know, like it goes both ways. But like, I don't think you're wrong necessarily. There's not enough evidence for my version either.
Yeah, that line, "Did your mum know?" It's hard to see. Looking at the rest of that section, it's hard to see what it's about, other than about being gay. You know,
it's intentional though, because the way that Rami read it, which is, "Did your mom know that your stepdad kicked out all the boxes?" Could also it could also be that way. Like, did your mom know in advance and she let this happen? That's cold. You know, your mom didn't stop him. But again, yeah, there's so many ways you could ask that question, but it was done, and I think in an intentionally ambiguous way, so that they're like, is Wyatt? Is he not? And we'll never know. But are we all in agreement that the narrator's gay though, and closeted?
I think there are enough clues there. You mentioned the example of the description of Wyatt's forearms. I would venture to say that most people don't think of erotic asphyxiation when they see large forearms. So kind of telling.
Yeah. And it does say that that Wyatt picked up herpes from a girl in Morris. Now, you know, even if he is gay, it's not to say that he doesn't go with women, but yeah, maybe that's a clue to the fact that Wyatt isn't. Yeah.
All right, and you know, maybe that line at the end, "We're all strong, none strong enough," and maybe, you know, if we take it from the perspective of this is mostly about closeted homosexuality, it could be about that, but it could also just be anyone that's bull riding seems to have a bit of a death wish. It seems to be running from something, and whatever it is, none were strong enough to overcome it. Doesn't matter what it is that inspired Wyatt to do this. I like it more and more the more we discuss it. Probably.
Yeah. There is such a lot of story here. That's why I quite like it, and it is sort of just a slice of life, but it does have, you know, it has a beginning when he starts bull riding. It has an end when Wyatt dies. So by my very simplistic view of what makes a story, it's got a beginning and an end, and it's got a sort of plot line and interesting narrative in the middle.
So here's the thing I didn't like as much, which was, was Wyatt's death predictable to you?
It wasn't to me, but
I really saw it coming. I don't know, and I just felt like, oh, here we go. There's got to be some kind of, you know, climactic arc to this, and
if only because a lot of
he's being carried through the windshield. Oh, there it is. And I like I said, because it reminded me of that story, a separate piece, the Finney, who I'm comparing to Wyatt, does end up dying at the end as well.
I think when I read that, I wasn't surprised that he died. It seems, and to a certain extent, as we said earlier, these guys must have some sort of death wish type thing going on. Otherwise, why would they do it? It's a tremendously some of the research that in Wikipedia and whatnot, it's tremendously dangerous, and so many injuries they get through this. And I, you know, is it that thing that's sort of getting close to death, cheating death, the sort of mountain climbing thing? I don't know.
The adrenaline rush. A lot of people like the adrenaline rush, but there's many ways to get it, and this one seems particularly crazy. Especially because there is that line that the narrator has where he has the ice on his head, he's laying on his side, and he's watching the rodeo, and it's, where would we be if not for the spectators? What would this be without the spectators? Without the show, it's just a bunch of people risking their lives on the back of a bull. Like, you need the spectators there to make any of this seem sane, because without them, the actual thing that's happening is crazy.
Yeah.
And you don't have that with other general sports. You don't need people watching for rock climbing. You don't need people watching for rafting. There's something about this that's particularly crazy, that without people watching, it's like you just want to die.
Yeah, and it's a competitive sport as well, isn't it? So that's that's what provides the interest for the audience. You know, the fact that it's a competition between the bull riders, whereas you don't get that in mountain climbing. It's just person against the elements.
You know, but that's funny because you're right, but there are mountain climbing competitions. There are rafting competitions, and there aren't that many people that watch them. It doesn't have the same draw. So there does seem to be some sort of attraction into this will they, won't they die thing going on. Because in mountain climbing, you can have injuries and stuff, but very rarely is someone like seriously maimed or killed in it, right? It's still hard. Somebody still goes up some sheer face cliff with like no foothills. You're like, wow. But it doesn't have the same draw in the way that bullfighting does.
No.
What does it say about us?
Society, eh?
Yeah, because you can argue that the skill that it takes to be an amazing mountain climber isn't any less than it takes to be a good bull rider. You need to be in great physical shape. You need to be strong, and you need to have had years of experience to do this well. And yet, one is definitely more thrilling to watch, and it is because is someone going to get gored to there?
And also each sort of episode of bull riding is just 8 seconds. So it's for those people who've got sort of, you know, have problems with keeping attention on things, that you haven't got to watch it for too long. It's a bit like American football, I suppose, isn't it? That not because I like American football, for that very reason, that there's lots of standing around and then there's an explosion of action for a few seconds, and then it stops again. And it's the same in bull riding. There's this explosion of action. Yeah, it's, as I say, there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, no, but it is interesting, you know, that.
Yeah. Whereas you know, rock climbing competitions, it's pretty sort of look up and stare at the side of a rock face for a period of time.
The only people thrown by it are the people who do it. So then they'll see someone grab something and they all gasp, and then the rest of us are like, "What just happened?" Right? They're like, oh, "You're like, I don't know why."
Yeah.
It's a little bit like that video that went viral years ago, which is the freestyle canoe dancing. It's people in a canoe making the canoe spin and bend and lean to the side to music, and they'll choreograph a whole dance in their canoe. You should watch this. But like the people, maybe I'll like link to it in the show notes. It's gone viral. Many people have seen this, but I'll link to it anyway. And it's and the only people who watch it are other people who do like competitive canoeing. And they're in costume and everything. Okay, this is crazy. And then just people start like golf clapping after a certain spin, and I don't know why. Why was that spin better than the spin before?
It's a little bit like writing literary short fiction, because I'm convinced the only people who buy literary magazines are people who want to get their short stories into those magazines, and you know, the writers will say, "Oh, this is a very good story. This is a fantastic story, beautifully constructed, all this sort of stuff." And but the majority of readers go, "Yeah, not interested."
We should do a poll of our own listeners, like people who are listening. Are all of you? Because like we do know that a big chunk of our audience is people who are aspiring writers. When it's funny, I feel like aspiring writers is also a gamut. There's like people who are actively working on stories, and there's people who in their heads are writers but haven't actually written anything. Yeah, that counts. Okay, like, I know plenty of people like that. Yeah, but just people who like think about this in like a deeper way. Yeah, like how much of our own audience is just people who enjoy reading and never actually want to like write their own short story?
Yeah.
I feel like really only novels have that audience, because novels increasingly play out like a movie.
Yeah, I mean, when I was writing a lot of short fiction and trying to, you know, make it in literary short fiction, and I would tell people about it, so many people said, "Oh no, I don't read short stories. I only read full novels," and so many times, and I wonder what the market is for short fiction, and I think it used to be different. I think in, you know, decades and decades ago, I think people used to love, especially serialized short fiction. They would, like, every week they would get a newspaper or something, and they'd print part of a story in there, and people would read it. I think it's different these days, and I think people, if they're going to invest in a piece of fiction, they want it to be a long piece of fiction rather than a short piece where they invest, 15 minutes or something and then it's over.
Yeah.
I
think that's true. Now I want to take a poll on Twitter.
Yeah.
People who listen to Literary Roadhouse. You're an aspiring writer? Yes, no. That's it.
Yeah. So bull riding.
Though, actually, a lot of our audience also is older. So I wonder if that's we were talking about that people decades ago used to read more short stories. We're seeing some of that too.
Maybe. Do young people read short fiction?
I don't know.
Anyway.
Yeah.
We're getting off topic a little.
Yeah, but it was good.
Yeah.
So, any other comments on the story? I've gone through my notes.
Yeah, as Gerald mentioned earlier on, I enjoyed learning about this subculture and world that I had very little knowledge of. And among the things that I learned are that stingray boots are very expensive.
Because you were so going to buy some, weren't you?
Some go for over $1,000. It's ridiculous.
Wait, now I want to Google what this looks like. So more proof that Wyatt family has money. Also, on a soap water.
Good point. Good point.
I thought it was like a stingray on the wingtip in the front. Like I assumed it was just like the way that the leather was patterned. So I'm glad you did that research for me.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay. So yeah, that's
time to.
Are you ready to rate? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 5. I liked it, but also I can actually prophesying myself into a 5. I don't like it as much as I'd like 5.5 to 6. Oh, it's skill 1 to 6 for new listeners.
Go on, Ronnie.
I'll also go with a 5 for this one.
I don't know. This is really hard. I think it's only score, isn't it? I think a 5 also boring. Sorry. I was wavering between 4.5, but I thought it was much better than that. But then 5.5 was too much because it's it was a great piece of storytelling, I thought, rather than a piece of literary fiction. So I think 5 is a good score.
I just go by my enjoyment levels now, so I enjoyed it out of 5. Okay, so we're actually not doing a game. Rami, do you want to?
Yeah, so there's no game next week because we'll be having a guest, Gail Gilliland, and we'll be reading a short story that she recommended. It's a comedy, which we haven't done in a while, and the story is called The Kitchen Child by Angela Carter, and it's available as audio only, so consider this an audio treat. Those are Anais's words.
Thanks, Rami.
Yep.
Okay, so before you go listen to that story, settle our debate about Wyatt in the comments section at literaryroadhouse.com. Want to argue even more over character traits and what did or did not happen in the camper? Join the Literary Roadhouse Book Club, a monthly show that discusses full fiction novels. In fact, an episode will post this Friday. Join us on Friday for our discussion of The Heirs by Susan Rieger. Look, listener, I feel a lot has been left unsaid between us. Speak up before it's too late on Twitter at Lit Roadhouse or on our Facebook page. And a final point, the narrator says that a Canadian woman galloping horseback in a military outfit with fireworks shooting out of a Canadian flag is the most beautiful thing in the world. Help fund our fact-checking mission at patreon.com/literaryroadhouse. Every bit helps. And as always, share this podcast with strippers who wear wool socks. Until next time, read a good story.